Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Stewart Talent At Home interview series. I am Colt Cabana. I am an actor with Stewart Talent, but most importantly, I am a professional wrestler who also dabbles in the world of comedy, and that is what we are here to do today. We're here to talk about the Chicago comedy scene, and we have two of the brightest and very best Chicago comedians, stand-up comedians. First of all, let's introduce you to Joe Fernandez. Joe has been killing it on the scene. Of course, he has a debut album coming out May 28th, and he has a great presence on Instagram and YouTube. Hi, Joe. How are you?
Good. How about you, man?
I'm great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me introduce your cohort. Joe Kilgallon is a monster on not only YouTube and TikTok, but occasionally he gets on the stage and does stand-up comedy too.
On occasion.
Yes. Please welcome comedians you should know. Starter? What would I say to that?
Founder?
Co-founder, I guess.
Co-founder. Joe Kilgallon's with us. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Colt. Hey, Joe. Good to see you both.
So the purpose of this is we're all at home. We're all doing nothing. For me, I'm a pro wrestler. There's not much live wrestling going on, but one of the things I like to do when I'm not wrestling is I go and I see you guys do stand-up all the time. So you guys are stand-up comedians, and obviously there's not much stand-up going on. Before we kind of get into what's happening with the quarantine and all of that stuff, maybe a little introduction from you guys, how long you've been doing it, and what kind of comedy or where it kind of stems from. Kilgallon, let's start with you.
I have been doing it for 13 plus years now. I was born and raised in Chicago, so it's kind of a nice little thing to just start in this city feeling at home, where a lot of people like Joe Fernandez had to immigrate here. Yes, I said immigrate. And it's been going great. It's a great, vibrant city, obviously, and the scene is really cool, and everybody likes to be creative and try new stuff because that's how you stand out in Chicago.
For those unfamiliar with your stand-up, do you have a style of stand-up comedy?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I missed that part. My style, I guess, I kind of talk about real stuff that really happened to me. It all kind of stems from that. I mean, I obviously exaggerate to a comedic effect or embellish here or there, but some observational, little angry.
He's raw.
Very raw, I guess. I swear. I'm just try to be the same guy off stage as I am on stage. And observational, some angry storytelling, a little bit of a mix between, I don't know. I always thought of myself as a mix between Seinfeld and now I guess Bill Burr would be the contemporary, but there's always some new angrier guy that comes in. Hopefully Bill Burr could get out of the way and I could be the new angry guy. Right. That's funny. But I like to be positive too.
Joe Fernandez, same question. How long you been doing it? What's your style, I guess I would ask?
Yeah, I started I did go to high school in the suburbs of Chicago, Naperville, Illinois, or as the kids call it, the Thrill. You all are familiar. Yeah, I started doing sketch and improv in high school, did it over at IO, and then went to college from Marquette, got the Chris Farley scholarship up there. So that was a real big deal to me. It's one of my favorite SNL guys of all time. And then came out to Chicago, started doing stand-up. Joe and I started pretty much the same time, 10 years, or God, even longer, right? 12 years? Been doing stand-up in Chicago, something like that. 11, something like that.
Joe, what's the Chris Farley scholarship? What is that?
They give it out to your junior year. If you're in the College of Communications, they have everyone come in and do an audition, either a self-written piece or something else. And you audition in front of the head of the theater department, head of the communications department, and a couple of people. And then they tape it. They send it to Chris Farley's family. They watch the tapes and then give the scholarship to someone based on who they like best and their suggestions. So it's pretty cool, man. It was
That's awesome.
Yeah, I know. It's
you did, and it's pretty notorious that you did Van Down by the River for them, right?
Yeah. But it wasn't the original sketch. I did the third time they did Van Down by the River. So I think that's the originality is what they wanted.
Great. That's great. Well, the first, I guess, question I had right away was for Joe Kilgallon. You talk about your observation or being angry, but also we can hear that beautiful, beautiful Chicago accent. Do you play it up as a character in your stand-up? And do you do a lot of Chicago-based comedy?
I do some Chicago-based comedy. I don't play it up. I don't even think I have one. I don't think I have a Chicago accent. I think I don't know. I always feel, maybe everyone thinks this. They go, we sound like the people on TV. Growing up, I thought everyone sounded like the Midwest. And then when I moved out, I was in LA for a few years. Everyone was like, whoa, look at that accent. And then when I booked my first television role that Stewart booked the audition for, the great people at Stewart Talent on Chicago Med, I had friends around the country going, man, you could really hear your Chicago accent in that role. And I was like, oh. But no, I don't play it up. I definitely talk about Chicago. I think Chicago is such a character. unto itself. So a lot of humor comes out of it. It's a funny city.
Joe Fernandez, what about when you kind of hit the road a little bit? I know you recently drove to Houston, Texas like a maniac.
That wasn't for
It's a great
comedy.
story.
That was for something else. But for when you do other places, especially when it's people who are of different, let's say, ideological backgrounds or whatever, you know, you're going to either Upper Peninsula, Michigan or Iowa. That's always interesting to see how you can deal with different folks and different backgrounds and all that.
Do you sneak in the Chicago-centric kind of stuff?
I don't do any Chicago-centric stuff, really, I don't think. If you to define my style, I'd say it's like really absurd and silly, but about serious topics.
Kilgallon?
I always vibe with rural America.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you try to attempt your Chicago material when you're not, like, let's say, downtown?
Here's what I learned, and this will be good for anyone who's thinking about getting into stand-up comedy. I know a lot of actors who go into it and end up being great. You could take inside jokes and make them outside jokes. I have been able to do like Chicago-centric stuff in other parts of the country. You just got to add like an extra line. It depends though. I mean, I remember I was in Long Beach, California at the Long Beach Laugh Factory, and I did a joke about like a winter jacket, and that bombed because no one knows what the hell a winter jacket is in Southern California, really. But you just take an extra sentence or two to just be like, here in Chicago, it's like this. Think about all the people who do like late night television. They go, oh, the New York subway system. And that's broadcast to millions of people across the country. It just takes a little tweaking, you know?
Let me ask you this, guys, because you guys both started in the independent rooms. You know what? Actually, let's start with the open mics. Let's talk about the open mic scene in Chicago and just kind of what it was when you both started. You guys said you started at the same time.
I mean, starting out, I loved the Chicago scene when we first started out. Not that it's not fun now, but man, it used to be everyone knew each other. There was one mic a night, one show a night. And it was, I mean, Joe will agree. It was just like kind of the heyday. I mean, also everyone's going to say that because whenever you started out, it's probably when it's the most fun. You're going out, it's new to you. But I mean, it used to be that everyone was at the same spots every single night. So really, especially starting out in Chicago back in, I don't know, what was that, 2009? That it was like, there was enough people here that it was a community. It wasn't like so small as what I've heard about before, where there's like one open mic and just Zanies and that's it really. But there was enough people and enough shows, but not too many that it wasn't fragmented. And it was just so fun going out, being with your friends. And obviously bombing wasn't fun, but beyond, even then it still was kind of fun. Once you knew everybody, once you were integrated into the scene, that's when it's the most fun, where sometimes you'll shout at each other during a mic if it's really boring or dull, and you feel in a weird way accepted when that starts to happen. So
and Kilgallon, can you kind of give me like what were the places you were going to, and what was the routine? Was it show up at 6, wait for a couple hours, you have to buy a drink, and then go home and work and do a real job?
So my routine
give me some places. We want to hear some names of these places.
Cool. The first open mic I ever did was up in Rogers Park by Loyola, called Pressure Cafe and Billiards. One half of the place was a big pool hall, and then the other half was like a small coffee shop with a stage that could fit 22 people at most. Like, it was small, but it looked cool. Like, it looked like a comedy club you'd see like in the Village in New York City or whatever. And I remember the first time bombing really hard. Yeah, I mean, when you start off, like, so when you get there early, you signed up. That open mic would take out names out of a cup. So everyone had to sign up by, I think, 7 for like a 7:30 start. And so it wasn't that bad of waiting around. Now the scene's gotten so much bigger because so many stand-ups from Chicago have kind of blown up nationally. So I feel like more people have come here. Other places, Cork Lounge on Addison by the Brown Line right there, it was way different then. We were talking like 10, 12 years ago. Now it's like nice. Then it was just like the grossest looking basement you've ever seen. What else was there? Globe Pub on Irving near Lincoln. So a lot of stuff on the north side was really great. I agree, to add to Joe's saying, was it a little cliquey? Maybe, but everybody was welcoming too, as long as you were putting in the work. If you were someone who was just showing up and not taking it seriously, people would be like, well, why would we waste our time with someone who's clearly wasting their own time? And it was also a really cool thing because I guess this is kind of like 80s high school movie. If you were starting out and no one knew you, as soon as you started to get good, people would wave you over to their table. Hey, come eat lunch with us now. You're a part of this. And so I think that was kind of cool. It kept people striving. And like I said earlier, you had to be original. You had to be good for you to stick out, because it wasn't a scene that was, again, oversaturated yet. It wasn't everybody trying to be famous. It was people just trying to be funny.
Now, I went to a wrestling school in Portage Park on Irving. I
grew up right there.
Yeah, I got trained to be a professional wrestler. I paid them my $2,000. They taught me how to do it like a trade school. school. I know stand-up's a little different. It's a little weird how you're just expected to know how to do it and go up on stage and do open mics. So I guess both of you guys can kind of talk about the process of going to an open mic, maybe not knowing how to be a stand-up comic, and just kind of, I guess, is it learning through the open mic process in order to get to a place where someone will then pay you to become a stand-up comic?
I mean, I prefer it that way too. And I mean, you know, you can take classes if you want, but I think an open mic is a great way to, what is it called, baptism by fire or something, to just, you get to figure it out and make your own rules for what works and what doesn't for you, because everyone's voice is different, everyone's learning curve is different. And when you can really, because sometimes they'll, like, if you take I mean, again, you can take class if you want. I'm not trying to crap on that or whatever, but I just know that a lot of times when you take a class, sometimes it can make you feel like you have to work a certain way, and it doesn't work for everybody the same way, you know? There's some comics who don't really go to mics that often, and it makes their material seem fresh when they do shows. And I would say, you know, going to an open mic, the process that you learn from being on stage is just learning how to be yourself, your most authentic version of yourself, and what you think is funny is what you're going for every time.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that you're supposed to go to classes. I just think it's wild how that isn't the way it is.
Yeah.
That, you know, wrestlers, we learn, and then in stand-up you've learned. And again, you know, I've taken classes at the Lincoln Lodge too for stand-up too, and I'm not downgrading at all, but it seems to be the idea of it. Joe Kilgallon, like, did you go through a process of going to open mics, having material, and then realizing it's not working, and then like having to try to learn how to write a joke? Or do you think you knew what jokes were right off the bat?
No, I went through the process. I took Second City classes for sketch writing and improv for a good almost 10 months before I started to do stand-up open mics. And I was jotting down stuff in my notebook that was more stand-up in style. And so when I took it to the open mic, I didn't really know how to form a joke and everything like that. I think of it this way. And stand-up comedy is one of the few things where it's like, there are no classes. You definitely have to take classes in professional wrestling. You have to. And everything you'd have to. Even singers would get a voice coach if they really want to take it to that next level. Stand-up is such a weird, crazy thing that classes, I think, help a lot of people. And I think they might hurt some people, like Joe was saying, because it could stifle creativity. Some of my favorite guitarists are self-taught, and they've got this like creative, original style. That doesn't mean they're the best. They're probably not technically as sound as someone who went through, you know, school for it and all that kind of stuff. I just think you kind of learn, like when you're at the open mic, when someone kills and everyone's dying at their jokes, you're like, oh, I see what they did. And then you kind of figure that out. That's why you always give people who are new at stand-up a break, because I feel like when everyone, when they're new, is kind of doing an impression of a comedian they like a lot. Like when I was starting, it was kind of like a lot of people were just transitioning from pretending to be Mitch Hedberg to pretending to be like Dave Attell, pretending where you're like, oh, I could see who they're big fans of, or Patton Oswalt was popular at the time, Dan Cook. So you kind of they're new, you forgive that. And then eventually through trial and fire, you figure out, oh, I need to be more me. I need to find out my voice. And that's how you learn to write a joke. But no, I didn't know how to write a joke right away.
I think also open mics, it's not even just for joke writing or whatever, it's for thickening your skin and being comfortable with who you are on stage, because you're probably not going to do well. Like if you
they're mostly bad. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if someone's good, they're going to do bad. Like if and there are like as many as 40 comics at a mic sometimes. If you go to an open mic, maybe for a month, the same open mic, 40 comics go up, I guarantee you'll see maybe 5 people total do well, even if they're like good, you know, because it's just a tough environment. Everyone's sitting there. I've always said in open mic, the first half people bomb because no one's paying attention because they're thinking about what they want to say. Then the second half people bomb because no one's paying attention because they're so mad about how they bombed and what they should have said. That's all an open mic is. So you're really learning to thicken your skin and really learn how to talk in your voice, even in the most adverse situation, which I think is what's most helpful about an open mic compared to a class where it is supportive, which could be nice for kind of gaining more confidence. But I think eventually you do have to learn when you're in a room, maybe in a rural room or whatever, a place where people don't like you, learning how to stick to your guns and stick with your stuff. And I think open mics are best for that.
Okay, so we're here with the Stewart Talent kind of collective. So you guys are part of the team who are stand-up comedians, but there's a lot of actors and different kind of artists within the Stewart bubble, myself included, obviously. So maybe you guys could talk about kind of actors and improvisers coming into the world of stand-up, how it's looked at, how comedians look at it. Is it welcomed? How is it easier to be welcomed? What are the do's and don'ts? I'm sure there's some people who are like, yo, I was on Chicago Fire, Zanies, put me up. You know, I don't know if those are scenarios that are happening, if that brings anything for any of you guys.
I mean, if someone said that,
happening.
They would be in trouble for saying, like, if someone comes in saying, I was on Chicago Fire, can I get a bump at this mic? They would not go up till the very end. That is for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely true with open mics, but I think the clubs would probably put up someone who's a regular on an NBC hit television show. here's what I would say, because I have opened for a couple actors who I won't name. One's name was Shmeremy Schmiven, and he at least, or she
Right,
was at least, we don't know.
Yeah, way to keep it.
I don't know why I even bothered. The move that made the other comics be like, all right, cool, welcome aboard, was the fact that they were putting in the time. Because there are some people who are like, I'm famous, I'm on a thing, and then they just show up and wing it, or they're not respecting the other comedians, they're not respecting the art form, not respecting the audience. They kind of think the audience will just laugh because it's like, oh, they know me from such and such. And it's like, no, you got to really put the work in. If you're an actor who's been acting for a while and you got some acting credits and you want to go into stand-up, nobody owns the stage. Everyone's welcome. But if you really want to get the respect of your peers, which everyone should want in whatever they pursue, you have to put the work in. You have to show up as often as possible. If you expect to go to that top level, you can't be someone who shows up once or twice a week and then expects to bat third and play third. You know what I mean? Little baseball reference for the nerds. So yeah, I just think that's like the best way to break into it.
You think that's for the nerds? The baseball reference is for the nerds. Okay.
Baseball fans are nerds too. Everyone's a nerd. Whatever you're obsessed with, you're a nerd about that.
I think it's for the jocks, Joe, but go on.
All right, it's for the jocks. A lot of artist jocks up by Stewart. That's why we love Stewart. They got range.
Correct.
It's an agency with range. But yeah, I just think, I don't know, Joe, you probably believe that too. It'd be like Colt with the world of professional wrestling. I know, I think I've heard that David Arquette won over people's respect because they're like, no, this guy's legit loves wrestling. Mm-hmm. It's not just, I was on Friends and a couple movies and here I am. No, they're like, oh, he's legit. And that's why people like Eminem, when he first started rapping as some white guy, they were like, oh, what is he doing here? But no, they're like, oh, this guy knows the history of hip hop. He studied it. He respects it. Then yeah, all aboard. I think it just kind of goes that way with anything. Whatever you're like pursuing, if you're coming from a different world, you can't act like your world's better than that world. And this is just my side gig.
Fernandez, what about if they're not like stars on NBC, but they're acting as their thing and they want to try, let's say it's just someone who wants to try stand up.
Right. And that's what I was going to say is if it's like someone who's thinking about doing it, just know, like, doesn't matter if you're an actor, an improviser. I mean, as long as Joe's exactly right. Like if you keep putting in the work and showing up to mics at least 3 or 4 times a week, no one will care what your background is. People only care in stand up as long as you're working hard at it. If you're being smarmy about stand up, I think especially making fun of stand up now is a fad that's going out. I even used to do it when I first started doing the whole making fun of the what's the deal with, or do you guys like impressions, which is something I'm sure every comic, they're like Joe was saying, you have an imitation of someone that's kind of an imitation of Galifianakis really when comics do that. And there will be some stand-ups who do make that defining line. They will be like, oh, improv is dumb or acting is dumb, and it's like anytime anyone says that of any different group, I feel like it's because they know they can't do it, and the best way to make it seem dumb is by calling it dumb, and they're like, yeah, it's dumb, that's why I don't do it. And it's like, no, it's probably because you can't do it. I think that's why stand-up's crap on improv and vice versa or whatever. But if you're someone who doesn't care and you want to come on in and try it, I don't think any stand-up would be they wouldn't be any less welcoming than they would to someone who's a doctor. Let's say that. I'm not saying they'll be welcoming.
Or work at Walgreens, or if you work, doesn't matter. I don't think anyone really minds so much. It just depends how you enter and how you treat it.
Right. The first 6 months, it won't be feeling welcoming at all to anyone, no matter who you are. It's just, it's weird. You're in a bar with 40 strangers and you feel like everyone hates you after you get off stage after 4 minutes of bombing. And
so that's my next question is, if you do feel that everyone hates you, and I understand. Well, and if you want to get better, I understand the process of going up in an open mic and then realizing you did bad and watching the people that did good. But let's say you want to get better. As a wrestler, I love a good mentorship. I love someone who will help me out. I assume it's got to be probably hard characteristic-wise as someone, the stand-ups aren't necessarily the ones ready. That's why you do stand-up. You're alone. You're not necessarily ready to ask people for all this help. Is that something that you guys have done? Is that something people can do? How do you do that? How do you go reach and get more help from somebody to help you become a better stand-up?
I've had people, after I've either hosted a mic or a show or whatever, I mean, especially at open mics, it happens a lot. People will go, hey, could I ask you for some advice? And if they're a nice, normal person about it, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking someone who maybe if you saw them and like their set, asking them for advice. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's just the matter in which you do it. But I think comics, especially if it's someone who's established, will have no problem offering advice if you ask them for it. You should never feel shy about that. And I don't think you'd ever get a negative response to it unless you're like, I don't know how to put put it, but there are people who it's very off-putting the way they come up, like as if they're doing it more to try and I don't want to say the name of the comic. There's a comic who used to do this a lot, where he'd inject himself into conversations all the time that he saw other comics having, and that was a bad way to do it. If you're doing it to try and gain status or whatever, or just to talk to someone, that's not the way to do it.
That reminds me, on your social media accounts, when you start doing comedy, don't put comedian after your name. Don't be Bob Smith comedian, because it looks like, who's this guy? This guy's a bum. I think that's who you're referencing, Joe. Not Bob Smith, but someone along those lines.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think everything's about approach. I think most comedians are very like, yeah, we love talking about comedy and we love talking about ourselves. So if you want to ask us, hey, how'd you come up with that joke? Or do you have any advice on like something or other? It's all about the approach. You know, I've come across people who'll say stuff like, oh, I didn't like the people in that comedy scene because I thought they were standoffish. And I'm like, oh, I remember that guy. I remember the guy who's saying that. Yeah, he went up to shows, did his set, mumbled, and maybe he wasn't a good performer yet, but then he would go off in the corner, sulk, not talk to anybody, give off like a real weird vibe. Dude, you have to include yourself in life. Whatever you're doing, if you want to be part of something, you got to include yourself. I know it's hard for some people because they're shy, but if you want something, you got to speak up. Go up to that person, be like, hey, I thought your stuff was great. Really, I'm new to this. Is there any shows I could see you at besides an open mic? Is there like can I see you at Zanies or the Laugh Factory? Or, like you have to include yourself. You can't just be like, I'm standing over here now.
I will say, if you're at mics on a regular basis, you'll see the same people and you'll start to have connections right there. And then that'll get you in. I mean, everyone has a class that they started with and you were by yourself and then you saw the same guy at a mic 3 or 4 times in a row. And, you just bonded over that, even if you just went to the bar to get a drink and suddenly you're talking. And that's how it always starts with the friendships that you always create at the beginning of your stand-up career when you're doing open mics, because you're all in the same misery together. You're all trying to figure it out. You're all feeling very lonely and weird. And I think the more you do it, the easier it'll be to then talk to people and to integrate. And it may be 6 months before you even have the gumption to do it, because I'm a shy person too. I wouldn't think to go up and talk to someone really, or I'd think they'd be like dismissive of me or whatever, and maybe they would be, but I think most comics wouldn't. And I think most people.
I remember when you came up to me. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I remember when you came up to me. I said, "Don't look at me." I said, "Do not look at me." I said, "You go over there now."
This really did. The guy who I was the best man at his wedding. This really did happen. He was brand new to stand up. His name's Matt Riggs, and it was at Town Hall Pub, and he had gone up, and me and another former, I think he still does it. I don't know why I said former, but Steinbrenner, former Chicago comic. We were talking, and Matt Riggs came up to talk to us, and we kind of just like shrugged him off. Which I will, and I was the best man at his wedding though, so it all is fine. But that can happen only because there are some weirdos, obviously, that then come out. So if a comic does dismiss you, maybe it's because it's only the first time they've met you, and they're not sure if you're normal or not. Like, I feel bad saying that, but it's kind of true. Like, there are people who you're not sure, if I talk to this person, what's about to happen. And you kind of have to be a little bit cautious of some of the weirder folks. As long as you approach in a normal way, if you are self-aware enough to know you're normal, you should be fine.
All right, that's good advice. Joe Kilgallon, you talked about on your social media, don't be at Bob Smith comedian. So this is something that I get a lot as a wrestler. A lot of people talk to me. I have a nice social media presence, and they ask me, like, how do you do social media? That was a good don't. Maybe some other don'ts, do's and don'ts for not only both people who are starting, but people in your range who are, 10 plus years in.
Yeah. So with the whole don't be Bob Smith comedian, I mean, that's something on Facebook you see a lot. Someone on there, it's like not even a Facebook page, it's their regular like friend page. And it just looks, I don't know, it seems a little out of place for that. And even on Twitter, you just go by, Hannibal Buress is Hannibal Buress on Twitter. It'll say comedian in his bio, probably, in your profile. So yeah, in your profile, you could say comedian from Chicago. You just don't want to come off as desperate on social media, because you don't want other comedians thinking you're just trying to be famous. So when people do all that kind of needy stuff, it seems like, oh, they're just in it for the fame. Now, of course, you're going to self-promote. Hey, I just posted a new video to YouTube, check it out. That stuff's totally cool, and that's a smart thing that you should 100% be doing, creating content and all those kind of things. You don't want to promote to other comedians. I knew someone who, whenever there was a comedy show, they would tag all these comedians in their posts, and it's like, none of us are going up on that show. Why are you tagging us? We're not going to that show. We're going to be up on stage somewhere else. We're comedians. You know what I mean? Like, why would you tag? Like, that's just weird. It'd be like Walgreens tagging CVS every time they posted a new ad. Like, it'd be like, what are you doing?
I feel then you I would automatically hate you then if you're that
right.
person. Yeah. And I know that person doesn't think that, but that's how other artists feel, especially if they're constantly in their social media. It's just like, now I have to see this person who has nothing to do with me. Now I kind of hate you. And as Joe Fernandez would say, now I think you're a weirdo.
Yeah, it's a bad start.
Joe Fernandez, one thing and if you want to go on this, is one thing that as a wrestler, wrestler, when I see other wrestlers shitting on other wrestlers and saying how bad these wrestlers are on the social media, I just feel as though such a disservice to them, especially when we're going to see them at other shows. I don't know if that's something that's happened in stand-up. I don't know if that's something you've done in stand-up. I don't know if it's something you've learned from.
I think anyone who ever critiques another stand-up and does it publicly online, you see this with all kinds of things. I mean, I know a lot of comics had their opinions on whether, and this is on total opposite ends of the spectrum. You take Drew Michael and Hannah Gadsby's in that, and there were so many comics who on either way were kind of, crapping on her, saying they didn't think this was comedy. And it's like, who cares? Just do your comedy, what you think is comedy. And that, if that's your focus, if you're writing out these sonnets about what comedy is and what it should be, you're already focused on the wrong thing completely. And that kind of goes along with what Joe's saying, is that it's kind of like you're focusing on fame and your opinion, but you haven't even reached a level where it would really matter. This is not something you should be putting your energy towards, defining what comedy is and judging other. Like, if you focus only on what you think is funny and what you like, it's okay to just not like something and move on and go through that. I think when you talk about other people's acts and focus on this, that, and the other so much, that's so much energy being wasted that could have just been focused on yourself and what you think is funny.
Well, because comedy's a broad thing. It's like punk rock bands don't care about the latest country album. Yeah, it's all music, but everything's different genres, and not everything's for everybody. And I know what you're saying, Cole, like to just trash each other. We're supposed to be, you're not supposed to like everyone you work with. That's insane. We're not saying that, but you're doing a disservice to your profession. I think it's hard enough to be a comedian. It's hard enough to be a wrestler. It's hard enough to be anything that's out of the ordinary of a 9-to-5 job. So you should have respect for anyone who's going for it. And as long as they're not stealing, because if someone's stealing material, then we should say something, because we hold each other to high standards. And as long as they're not like hurting people, being abusive towards people in your scene or in your community, then look, I don't think we should be out loud judging each other. It's a bad move. It's a bad look.
All right. I like that. Let's talk about stealing, especially in the Chicago scene. It's a small circle. Does that happen? What do you do about it? Do you police yourself?
I had a dude who stole my entire 30 minutes. When was it? Like 8 years ago? I've told you this story, haven't I, Joe?
I don't think so.
Technically, I wasn't. I told the guy if he stopped doing it, I wouldn't blow him out of the water. But it's been 8 years. I don't think he does stand up anymore anyway. This guy's name was like Benji something. We did a show in Chicago together, and I went up to Rochester Goonies. I did a feature set there, and the entire staff comes up. They're like, "Where did you hear those jokes?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "There's a guy who does that exact set all the time here." And I found out I did a show with him, and I emailed him being like, "Hey, is this true? And if so, I'm gonna blow you out of the water unless you stop doing it." And then he wrote back being like, "Yeah, sorry, I just didn't know what to do. I couldn't write my own jokes. I took your material." It was one of the weirdest. So I guess that's a way to deal with it. Email them and say you're going to blow them out of the water if they keep stealing your jokes.
Yeah. Is that your new T-shirt? Blow them out of the water?
Yeah, that's my new business card too. Yeah.
Is that happening around locally, Joe Kilgallon?
I have not come across anyone that I thought deliberately had stolen anything from me. Or, there's some people where you're like, they maybe took from someone else, but sometimes it's parallel thought. And if it's obvious to someone, it's been handled like Joe Fernandez would have handled it, where someone just says, because I've heard other comedians besides Joe tell me, oh, this one new comic was doing the same joke, and I know they took it from another comic. So I just pull them aside saying, hey, it's a great way not to get booked. And as soon as they hear that, I got to stop, because that'll end you real quick in a city that is pretty tight knit like Chicago, where everyone talks. Yeah, in any scene, if you're stealing material, it's going to catch up to you. People are going to know, and then it's not worth the risk. Why do that? There's parallel thoughts. There's similar things that you could say, hey, I did my take on the same subject. That's going to happen. If someone's a political comedian and another one is, you're going to cover the same stuff. But yeah, definitely you're going to want to put your own spin on things. Otherwise, it's just going to be a bad look.
Yeah. And I think also there is like a courtesy that comics pay to each other. If you hear someone tell a joke and you're like, hey, by the way, I've heard someone have a similar joke, because if you know the person's doing parallel thought, just to avoid that issue, be like, hey, just know I've heard this somewhere before. Or, having someone say that to you too. I think everyone has that courtesy of making sure no one gets accused, like when it is parallel thought genuinely, and no one gets accused of that.
That's great, Joe. When I started wrestling, I didn't mean to. It didn't sound
kind of so sarcastic.
Oh, great job.
Well, I think I'm doing fine, thank you.
When I started wrestling, everyone was like, "Well, when do you get to WWE?" Right? That was if you're not a wrestler if you're not in the WWE. So I'd like to know, when you guys first started, what was the WWE of stand-up comedy in Chicago? What was the big pie in the sky for the city of Chicago? And now, I guess, 10 years later, where are you guys at now? And what do you see as kind of a big get as opposed to 2009? Yeah, and anything that kind of sparks kind of communication on that?
I mean, Zanies for sure was the golden goose back in our day. I mean, doing Zanies Old Town was like the ultimate, dude. And it took a lot. I mean, I remember, Joe, I don't know how many times you did that Rising Star Showcase, but I did it like probably 8 times in the span of a year and a half just to get booked for a hosting gig. So it was.
Yeah, I had a weird up and down with it. And I love Zanies, and I work there a lot now. But I remember doing that. It's like a Monday night audition. I did it and then did really well. And I got asked to do it 2 weeks later. And everyone's like, that's unheard of. You're gonna be a regular. And then I didn't do as well on that set. And it was like 2 years before or 3 years, I think, maybe before I got in. Yeah, Zanies was definitely the crown jewel. And then as far as the independent rooms, it was Lincoln Lodge and Chicago Underground Comedy.
Mm-hmm.
So those were like the 3 things I think every new comic had on their like little bucket list of things to check off. That's definitely shifted now. I feel not to be braggadocious.
I'll say it for you.
Say it for
you
me.
should know is the independent show you want to do. Joe's too modest. It is the top independent show, probably in the country, really, when you think about it. I mean,
I'll be cocky on that one. It is. The LA one had Bill Burr up, but right before the pandemic started and shut everything down. The New York one is packed every week.
Yeah,
the Chicago
New York
one is sold out about every week.
And the Chicago one's the best of it all.
And of course,
yes, it is. It's the mothership.
Comedians you should know every Wednesday night at Timothy O'Toole's downtown Chicago.
Yeah, once it comes back, we don't know what's going on.
Don't you guys have a show this week, right? It's in your next one, 5 days?
Yeah, as far as right now goes, Community Show is definitely an independent show. That I mean, Lincoln Lodge is still great, and people still want to do Chicago Underground Comedy and Parlor Car, and there's a lot of great. ComedyofChicago.com is a great website if you're a new comedian or want to get into comedy, or you just want to go watch comedy. Clubs, Laugh Factory, Zanies, Comedy Bar. So there's some great clubs there. Surrounding suburbs, you got the Improv out in Schaumburg. I love that place. Woodfield Mall, you can get a Cinnabon and go watch some stand-up. You can't anything more than that. You're just being greedy. And where do I see the future? Is that part of it? Do we have like a past, present, and future?
Sure,
okay, I can't remember.
And how can we make Chicago comedy better? How about that?
How could it be better? Honestly, I think if more comedy clubs were like Laugh Factory, and I love Zanies to death, and maybe they won't like me saying that per se, but what Laugh Factory does every Friday, Saturday, and every night of the week, it's just local talent, and they'll have some out of town headliners come through. But when I lived in LA, and I know New York's like this, all the clubs are just their showcase. So it's like 5 or 6 comics who live there go up, and what that does is it's more sets for those comics, so everyone gets better, and those clubs kind of become the people going there like, oh, these people are all going to be big, or even if they don't think they're going to be big, they think they're already big. Oh, I go to Laugh Factory every Friday night and I see that Joe Fernandez guy. That guy's huge. Like Chicago has this mentality, but this stepping stool thing that I can't stand. It's like, get great here, then go to New York or LA. I think that's so in the past. And that's where I want the future of Chicago comedy to go. More industries coming here, as Stewart knows. More television shows are being filmed here. But I think if more comics stayed here, hustled together in a sense, and just like there needs to be more platforms. If there was more platforms, I think more people would stay. And then you could go to New York for a week of shows, LA for a week of meetings, and do all this kind of stuff. But Chicago is where people should be looking to stay. Because with the internet, as you know, Colt, no one said to you, you have to move to Atlanta or you have to move to Connecticut. Atlanta's WCW for the nerds out there, right? But yeah, I think the future of Chicago comedy is to just have more big things, whether it's like there's a podcast network right now called People of Comedy that our friend James Webb runs. A lot of the comedy clubs now are putting out their own content and promoting the comedians more. I think Chicago as a whole, we did bad jobs of promoting our stars, and that's why our stars would leave to the coasts. So I think if we could keep our stars here, we're like that mid-level team that loses to these big cities, and we don't need to be like that anymore. We're right up there with them. We're better than them.
That's right. And speaking of Chicago stars, Joe Fernandez, where can everyone see you on the internet? Where are you at?
Well, I've been getting texted a lot about being in a Humira commercial recently, so you can see me in that for sure. Yes. Oh, adorable.
Wow, extra points for Kilgallon here. Fernandez, where can everyone see you on the internet?
You can go to Joe Fernandez on YouTube, Joe Fernandez84 on Instagram, Joe Fernandez84 on Twitter, and on May 28th, my debut comedy album, Ugly, will be out and about. And you were there for the 7 o'clock show, and it was taped at Comedians You Should Know. So, but yeah, May 28th, Ugly comes out, my comedy album. Make sure to buy it on iTunes. Available for pre-order the 21st.
Joe Kilgallon, can you hear us without your headset on?
I can. I took it out.
Okay. Can you tell us where this baby is on the internet?
This baby is at Dylan. No, he doesn't have anything yet, thank God.
At Dylan.
At Dylan Comedian. Comedian Dylan. He's just turned 1 a few weeks ago. Anyhow, you can follow me on my YouTube channel. I post a ton of stuff on there. I've got like almost nearly 3 hours worth of stand-up on there now. My latest comedy special called I Didn't Say Anything Bad is available on there. I put it in clips to make it real easy for everybody. So that's youtube.com/Joe Kilgallon. And JoeKilgallon.com. I'm on Twitter at my name, Joe Kilgallon Comedy. On TikTok, I post a lot of stand-up clips there too. And thanks, everybody.
Well, wonderful. Well, we appreciate you guys coming on. Of course, I'm Colt Cabana at Colt Cabana on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, ColtCabana.com. And if you like wrestling, you can watch me on TNT every single Wednesday night at 7 o'clock Central. Joe Fernandez, Joe Kilgallon, the Joes, we appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much for talking to us here in the Stewart family and being a part of the Stewart At Home interview series.